again. Great. And everybody see my PowerPoint? Yes, no?
Not yet.
Nope.
Okay, let's see. Takes me a little bit to get used to Zoom. I'm not used to being on Zoom.
There it is.
Okay, perfect. Let's see if I can just get it to a place where I can look at it better. Okay. So again, my name is Carlin Ziegler. I'm the Olmsted County Parks and Trails Director. I've been with the park system for 18 years. And to bring a little bit of other expertise into this, I was a EMT for 10 years, retired from that now. And I've been a firefighter now for 11 years. So I do have some of the emergency response background along with just a lot of the training and response that we've had within our parks department. So yeah, we have to plan for everything. In our parks, we kind of have the world of really random emergencies, things that don't normally happen in some other areas. So we do really have to kind of prepare for everything. Everything from medical emergencies to fire emergencies, environmental emergencies. A lot of us have lakes and rivers, so we have potential water hazards and drownings. And then we always have our weather. Our weather is a big one that affects our parks in many different ways. We have all sorts of fun weather events up here in Minnesota, so we deal with a lot when it comes to the parks. And then of course we're out in nature, so we get animal emergencies as well, whether it's a snake bite, because we do have timber rattlesnakes in our state, and then maybe other animals, dog bites, and other animals that we might encounter out in our woods and areas. So lots of different potential emergencies that we can run into. So I am not necessarily able to really see you guys real well. So if you have a question along the way, please just turn on your microphones and let me know if you have a question. Okay, so like I said, I can't really see you real well, but who's been in this situation? I think there's probably a fair amount of us, if we have been in the parks and trails world for any given time, we have probably run into this type of situation. And it's not the easiest situation to be in. There's a lot of different things that go on, and where you're at in your parks and trails can make a huge difference to what this scenario might look like. So what do we do with all of the different types of emergencies that we're going to have in our parks is plan, plan, and plan. Plan ahead for everything. Like I said at the very beginning of the video, it was plan for the worst, because you just never really know what's going to be happening in your parks, and brainstorm with your staffs all the potential scenarios that might happen where you're at in your situation. So staff training is a really, really big part of that. And some of you might have small training exercises that you do, and some of you might be in a really a big agency that do a lot of training and have a lot of opportunity for training. But no matter how small you are, I think all of these things can and should be implemented into your organization. And you can start small and work big. And I'm a big person with sharing everything I have and everything I know. So you use your Greater Minnesota board and members to kind of reach out to, use a sounding board, give each other tools. And so today I'm going to try and give a couple of tools to everyone here as well. I will throw them into the chat. But we have a lot of different documents and things like that I can share with you. One of those things is our general guidelines for any emergency that we have in our parks. So this is just one of the pages that we have, starting off with communication, and the ways that we can communicate, and then what's our responsibility as a staff person within a response to any kind of emergency situation, because it's very, very different depending on what it is. So in our department, in our whole county, it is optional for any department to have CPR training or first aid training. But I, as the parks director, I make that a little bit more on the mandatory side in parks and trails, that we have CPR training, we have first aid training, we actually have training for EpiPens and Narcan. All of those things I want to make sure that our park staff knows, because you all know it might be a while before help can get to you. So whatever we can do to help ourselves and the public in an emergency situation is going to be really, really essential to potentially saving someone's life. So have those things on hand, have those trainings, have a simple first aid kit on site and your AED. Just kind of make sure you have those first aid and first response type things that you might need. Everything from bee sting to a heart attack, which very easily happen in our parks. And then if you know what it is, or you have part of your it's part of your agency, it's the FEMA training, the incident management or incident command training. Been through all the different levels of the incident command, but even if you just have a small understanding of chain of command and who a point person is and how to kind of run the logistics of emergency response, it's going to help you implement it in the small things that you do, even in the little you have a child missing that went out of sight from your parents at a playground, to the big huge responses. This can be implemented at any kind of a level of response that's needed. But just a general understanding of the incident management system can really, really help keep things organized and calm within your response. So key is let one person be in charge and go from there, and let the experts that come in start taking over if needed. But too many cooks in the kitchen does not work in an emergency. So always make sure you have those point persons. And I invite you to go to the FEMA webpage, look at some of those things, and maybe think about implementing that as part of your annual training for your staff, or at least an onboarding thing when new staff come on. Since we do have a lot of greater park areas, a lot of natural resource areas, there's different types of training that we might need from other people in our organization, such as the chainsaw training or UTV training. So we do implement both of those along with other trainings for our seasonals and for our staff. Everybody should know how to run a chainsaw, or at least work around chainsaws. And so you got to kind of think through all of the different things you might need during your emergency situations, and then what you should be trained on as, the experts in your given field. All right, so we're not the only ones that need to be trained in our parks. Your emergency response personnel also need to be trained. Now they're trained to know what to do in their particular situations. Fire departments go through trainings every month. We're always training on things, putting out fires, all that kind of stuff. However, they don't necessarily know our parks or our trails and all the different scenarios that they might run into in those areas. So invite your emergency response personnel out to your park. If they haven't been there before, if they're not already doing trainings in your parks, invite them out there and go over what kind of trainings they might need in your park. And then hopefully they can run through some scenarios and get to know the area a little bit better. Our Byron Fire Department comes out to Oxbow, which is right next to the park. And as you can see, they do the river rescue training and rope training in our area. The other picture is a response team for search and rescue. So easy to get lost in our woods and things like that, and have a lost person or an injured person in the woods. And we need to be able to figure out how to find them. And your emergency personnel also needs to get trained and used to what we have in our particular area. The more everybody around you knows your parks and a little bit more about them, the better off your response is going to be. So yeah, get anybody that you can, whether it's ambulance, fire, your DNR personnel out there, lots of different agencies that could potentially respond. Make sure they've come out to your park at least once. So then when you're working with your emergency response teams that are not part of your staff and outside of your park, think about the scenarios of, do they have the equipment that they need for emergencies in our parks and trails? And that's why it's really important to bring them out to your park and talk about some of the scenarios that you've seen and run into, some of the trainings that they can do, because we've got remote locations. So do they have any of the equipment that might be needed for remote location rescues, such as ATVs, UTVs, some of the stretchers that can go over rough terrain and things like that? Do they have drones to help with heat seeking if you have somebody lost, or the rope rescue type things? So they love their fun little gadgets. So give them an opportunity to find some more fun little gadgets by making sure that they have all the tools that they need if they need to respond within your parks and trails. But then think about your side when you're talking to them about, do you have all the resources they need to do their job? Such as, what's the access look like to some of your remote locations, and where are they? And making sure that you provide some sort of access to your remote locations. Can you communicate with them? When they do get on scene and everybody's chaotic and everybody's running everywhere, how are you going to communicate? Is it going to be cell phones? Is it going to be radios? Are your radios programmed with everybody on the same chat channels so everybody can get on the same channel and talk with everybody? That can be a really important key part to running really smoothly, is making sure that everybody can get on the same page and on the same channel if needed with the communications. That can be mitigated a little bit by your incident command system. If you as a park manager are there and you're the expert in the parks, you're the expert in the terrain and everything else, you better have the fire chief and the sheriff standing right next to you, or whoever is the highest in command, and the three of you stay together and communicate out to your various staff and people. But it's that top of the command. Those people stay wherever they're at in one location, and they are the communication out to everybody else. So if possible, get everybody else on the same communication methods. But if not, make sure that you have the key people communicating the messages between each other out to the rest of the staffs. And then I hope everybody has thought about, do they have a key to your buildings? We're not there all the time in our parks. And so do they have a way to get into your shop building if it starts on fire? Do they have keys to your nature center if something happens after hours? There's a thing called the Knox box that every fire department works with, and sheriff's department as well. They're the only ones that can get into it. But if you put your park key into that Knox box outside of the door, then any emergencies that happen, all they have to do is open that little box, and then they have the keys to get into your building. Otherwise, they're going to just cause a whole heck of a lot of damage. They're going to get in however they can, and it's just going to cause a whole bunch of damage, and it's going to increase the response time. So having those keys to the building can be a really, really important key piece as well. We all know that there's going to be barriers to response and rescue. So think about those things. And in your particular situation, in your parks and trails, what are some of those barriers to a response and rescue? I know at this park, Oxbow Park and Zolman Zoo, access points is a huge, huge barrier to this park. The river runs right around through here and divides the entire park in half. There are 3 bridges that go across the river. They are pedestrian footbridges with stairs. Therefore, if you have an incident in the woods, you cannot get a UTV over there easily. And I say easily because there is one area where you can get back over into this whole other side of the park, which is across on a ravine and way up high into it, hillside. You got to go all the way around the road on the outside of the park and go up this nice little access here on the side. And it's very steep. At this point, right here, hopefully you can see my cursors, that is the point where EMS gets to stop. No ambulance, no fire trucks are going to get beyond that point because of the steep terrain. And then you may say, well, let's get some pickup trucks up there. That's all great and fine. Pickup trucks can go this far, and then they can't go on our trails anymore because of the way our trails are built. So looking at the picture, you might say, well, okay, I see what the barrier is on this particular trail. The tree is down. Makes it tough to even get a UTV across that. And that is true. But the reason I put that picture in is this tree was part of an incident. This tree fell on a group of 3 students that were walking in our woods when it was really, really windy out. This tree fell over. It actually fell and hit one of the students. And so we needed to respond to that situation because she had some injuries that would not allow her to be able to hike back out of the park. And if I can get my cursor to work here, the incident happened right here by this number 4 on our grid map. So that was a situation where we had to be able to carry somebody back out on a stretcher. And so if your EMS personnel has to stop way back over here and your trucks have to stop way back over here, that leaves ATVs and being on foot to get that person back out. So when you think about it, you said, yeah, sure, you got the ATVs, UTVs, no problem. Well, the problem is backboards don't work real well just on the back of a UTV. So although we could get to her quickly with a UTV, we could not get her out quickly with a UTV. We got her on a stretcher, we got her on the backboard, and we had to use that backboard to carry her approximately a half a mile out of the park, or at least to the point of a pickup truck. Thank goodness she was a very small individual. She probably didn't weigh much more than 100 pounds. But you can imagine if you have a big person laying out there on the trails and you're trying to carry them out on a stretcher on trails, which are not dirt trails like ours, aren't like super smooth. So it can be very difficult for your staff and your firefighters to carry someone that long distance over uneven terrain. So those are the kind of the things you want to think about. Like, do we have any kind of specialty backboards or specialty equipment that we can maybe purchase or fabricate to handle situations like this? Or in our instance, we created helipad sites in several areas of our park. Still have to carry the person a certain distance. But when it comes to not being able to get emergency vehicles across our river very easily, we had to have a couple of spots where at least a helicopter could get in to evacuate someone if it was a really, really bad emergency. So on top of this, this is a really tall hill. In the middle of our prairie, we mow a big circle area for a helipad. And then down here in this area down in the bottom, we have another one that's across the river. So if we get a situation where we can't bring someone up and over the stairs of a bridge, again, we have some way to evacuate them out if needed. So lots of different things to think about. The other thing is when a person calls you and says, hey, we need help, you know, they called 911, 911 calls you and say, hey, you got someone on the trails calling for help. Knowledge of the landscape or lack thereof can make a big difference. I don't know about you guys, but most of the time our hikers don't know where they're at in the woods. They have a really hard time telling you exactly where they're at. So finding the person in the first place can be a very big barrier that we have to deal with. And then for your first responders, again, they don't know the park. They don't know the terrain very well either. So if it happens in the evening and we don't even know about it, again, if your first responders have never been out to your park, it's going to make it pretty darn difficult for them to find someone as well when they don't know your park at all. Hopefully they're going to be calling a park manager or something like that, and eventually you'll get there. But another good reason that your first responders at least somewhat know your park. If it happens in more of your high recreation areas, you'll get crowds and what I would like generously call curiosity, or your looky-loos, who all just want to come and see what's going on. And those crowds can create major problems and people kind of getting in the way of what you're trying to do. So those crowds can be a big barrier at times. And then, of course, like I said, the time of day. There may be no staff around in your park when an emergency happens. So always talk amongst your staff and go over what a lot of those barriers in your area might be. And then there's those things that, boy, you wonder if you're ever even going to think out. The scenarios can be endless. We have a boat launch at one of our parks in our reservoir. And this is a rescue that we had to perform when somebody didn't put their car in park while they were launching their boat and they went right down into the water. Luckily, they were able to get themselves out in time. But in this situation, in a lot of situations, there's not always anything you can do, especially if you're not trained to do it, that we're not always able to respond in the best way without putting ourselves in harm's way. But this is a great example of how many agencies might be involved in a rescue situation or an emergency situation. You can see in the top right, we've got 3 different agencies here. We've got our conservation officers, we got our sheriff's department, and we've got the tow truck company there ready to pull the vehicle out. Then we've also got the local dive team that needs to come in to help get the car out as well. So these are teams that you might not necessarily think about getting out there to train in your park. But again, just try and think of any scenarios you can, or past scenarios that you've had that you think, hey, it might be good to get them back out here again. It's pretty rare, but maybe we get them out here. So most of the time, dispatch is going to know who they need to call for situations, but not always. Again, you guys are the experts in your parks, and you might know a landowner next door that you need to call if you need to cross their land, or maybe it is the dive team or the conservation officers that you know should be there, but maybe are not there. So always just kind of, you know, speak up, be involved in what's going on. Try not to be in the way, but be involved as the experts of the area. So in the situation of emergencies and who to call, sometimes it's very obvious when you call 911. A lot of different emergencies, medical, fire, things like that require just a call to 911, and that gets things rolling. But then there's probably a whole other tree of people that you need to call or maybe it's not a 911 call, but power outages and things like that. So have your list of emergency contacts available and in an area where all staff can get to them at all times, so that if something happens in your park and goes down, they at least have a number to start with in order to get the ball rolling. Make sure you have all of the staff phone numbers in there, so they can call each other, and they can call any other people that they might need to. Not everybody has each other's cell phone in their contact list of their phone. And it's not a bad idea to have their spouse's phone numbers in your phone as well. So this is just an example out of one of the pages that we have for one of our parks for the emergency safety information and protocols that we have. And it just starts with where to call and who to call first. And this is a document that I will post in the chat. So if you want to look through it, it's a multi-page document about how to respond to every type of emergency situation within Oxbow Park and Zolman Zoo. So that one would include animal emergencies as well, but suit it to however your park needs for emergency situations. So phone numbers galore, you should always know and have the numbers of who you might need to call. And then there's the weather. Like we said this in the postings and everything, weather is changing, the intensity is changing, the frequency is changing, and there's a lot going on with weather, and we experience a lot of events in our parks and trails when it comes to weather and how we need to respond to that. So what do we do about it? Mother Nature is only controllable to not much of an extent, really. I mean, there is nothing we can do to prevent the weather, but there are things that we can do to prevent some of the damage and potential risks when it comes to the weather events that happen in your parks. So plan ahead. Plan ahead with your entire agency, not just your parks department, but plan ahead with everyone in your county, in your city, and make sure that everybody is on board with how to respond to emergencies when it comes to weather. If you don't have a COOP or a continuity of operations plan, I would suggest making sure that you put one together. Most likely your sheriff's department or police department already has a COOP, but it's a good idea to make sure that everyone has a COOP, including the parks department or trails. So you have just a very detailed list about what happens if the power goes out. What are our priorities that we need to make sure that we're handling? Life safety issues come first. Getting everybody's paychecks might be a little further down the line. So you just kind of prioritize everything about how your parks are run and what you need to do to keep things running and operating at a high level, on down to some of the smaller things that maybe can wait a week or two while you're responding to the other major emergency that is going on in your parks. So prevent what you can. There's only so much we can do. I mean, generally our parks and trails are built in areas that are not buildable for the most part. They're not residential areas for a reason. And a lot of our parks are like this one in a flood zone. And this is pictures of our third flood out of one season. So this is a picture of our campground restroom, which we built, this was 5 years. This is a 5-year-old building that we built out of the floodplain, out of the 100-year floodplain. And you can see in the far picture here, there's this nice little mark on the wall right here with marker. That is how high the water was into that restroom. It's about 5 feet high into that restroom. So again, we did not build that restroom far enough out of the floodplain. So If you think you've got it, go a little higher. And try and build as much infrastructure out of your floodplains as you can, or if as possible. We had events where our water in our river rises quite quickly. And if it's already high from events, in this particular season in 2019, we flooded like we normally flood, a normal flood event, in June, late June of that year. And then July 5th, right on 4th of July weekend, we flooded again, and it was already pretty high, so it flooded even more. And then it was July 28th or 20th that it flooded again. So every 2 weeks, we got enough rain to create major flooding. And so this picture is from the last and worst of the flooding. But you just never know what your seasons are going to bring and how much it's going to compound throughout the season. So what we started working on after this particular flood was the plan to just move our campground altogether. It might take a lot more than just kind of moving one building or doing different things in your park to keep public safety at the front. But in this situation, we had campers that we evacuated in the middle of the night because the river was rising, and we couldn't evacuate them more than just their physical selves in their car and get out before both of the roads are also blocked off and you can't get out of the park at all. And it wasn't more than 20 minutes later that their tent was flowing down the river. So that to me is a little too close of a call, that we got to those people in time before their tent started flooding, and they would not have even been able to get out of our park in general. They could have got up to high ground and to safety, but they wouldn't have gotten out of our park for probably 3 days because our park creates an island, and all roads are closed into the park when we have a major flood. So think about what you can prevent. And sometimes that means really, really drastic measures. The picture on the left again is another picture during that flood, and you can see how far the road sign is on the water. This road dips way down. It's a normal road sign. That thing sits about 6 feet above the road. So our entire entrance road was completely underwater. And the other side going back out of the park was also underwater. So what we did was work with our highway department. We engineered a road that could be out of the floodplain, and we built an entirely new road and entrance to the park that was up and out of the 100-year floodplain, so that even when the park floods, there is a way in and out of the park. We have a caretaker on site, but when it comes to a zoo and having zoo animals in this park, you can't just leave them for 4 or 5 days until the water goes back down. But then it was the caretaker who lives there to take care of the animals for those next few days. So again, access in and out of your parks can be a really, really major part of prevention and making sure that you can work through various different emergencies that you run into. So like I said, just park planning and master plans within your park should always be thoughtful in including some of the emergency situations that you might see. But as much as we try to prevent, we are always going to have damage after weather events. I mean, it's part of nature and being in the path of severe weather. Whether it's tornado, whether it's floods, whether it's heavy snow storms. In the bottom, it was ice dams that cause a ton of damage. So it's there, and how do we respond to that? Really makes a difference about how safe we can make our parks again, and how quickly we can get them back opened up, and how quickly we can kind of repair a lot of the damage that's done. So In the EMS world, we have what's called go quick and quiet. It means, be very responsive and quick about things, but we don't need to make a big hoopla about it necessarily either. And really that is in quick and quiet in the parks and quick and quiet for managers is be the calm in the storm. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to coordinate. And so it's stay calm. If you have all of your planning, if you have all of your documents to refer to, take the time to refer back to them and go through those, and that will help you step by step and kind of keep that calm because you have a plan. It's when you don't have a plan at all, it makes it a little bit more chaotic and it's harder to control the situation. But stay calm, work diligently, intentionally about what you're doing, and make sure you're trying to involve the right people in the response that you need. That may be calling on people that you don't normally call on. So in a cleanup situation, there's a lot of people that really, really love to volunteer in our parks and trails, and we know that. So utilize it. Use your media outlets, utilize the volunteers that maybe already work with you, but reach out to schools, reach out to some of your organizations and see if they have the manpower to come out and help you. The more people you get working out there, things go very, very quickly, and people love being able to help with that kind of stuff. So I put local farmers on there because, man, they have the big fun equipment, right? They have the toys and the tools to come out and do some really heavy lifting, which you're gonna need in these situations when you've got massive trees laying on a building and laying all over the place. So you're gonna have to get that heavy equipment out there, and you might have some people right around the area that can come in and start helping you with that. Because your public works team might be busy somewhere else because it didn't happen just in your park. It happened, throughout your whole area. But public works is also another area that you are most likely going to need to rely on is your highway departments, your maintenance departments, whatever else you might have in the area that have those heavy equipment operators. So make sure you're getting those people on site and you have contacts for those people in these situations. And if not, make sure you have some private contractors that you might have on your phone list as well to come out and help. If you say it the right way, they might even donate their time to come out and assist with the cleanup in your parks. But then don't forget the utilities as well. Early on, make sure that you're getting a hold of your utilities, whether it's your power company because you have downed lines, your septic companies because you have vault toilets and now you've got massive amounts of floodwaters filling up your vault toilets, your phone and internet. You want those things back up and running as soon as you can, because without some of those things, it can make your response in cleanup a little bit more difficult if you don't have power and you don't have phones. So make sure that those utilities are some of the first people that you call to come get things up and running again. But like I said, volunteers are fantastic and they love doing the work and really helping get things back in order. But make sure that you're thinking about what they need and keeping them safe during cleanup. So if they are working around chainsaws, like this guy right here, make sure that anybody's around that person gets a quick little tutorial about, hey, don't stand on this side of a chainsaw and don't come up behind someone working on a chainsaw or whatever it needs to be. Make sure they at least understand a little bit about how to work around some of our big heavy equipment and or chainsaws and things that could cause bodily harm to someone if they do the wrong thing, especially students. High school students don't necessarily know how to work around these things or don't know much about it and where it is a safe place to be or not. And you all know that floodwaters are not clean waters. There's a lot of bacteria and nastiness. Like I said, the vault toilets, everything that was in there came up and got washed out. And that's the kind of stuff that you've got in floodwaters. So you are dealing with some nasty, nasty stuff when you are cleaning up after your floods. So make sure that you have PPE for all of your volunteers as well. Make sure they have their gloves, work gloves if they need it, leather gloves. You can ask them to bring those, but then make sure that they understand that you might just want to throw this stuff away when you're done with it. And make sure they understand the hazards that they're getting into. So they should make a well-informed decision about whether or not they're going to join in and help you due to the risks that you might be asking them to do. So just get your help there, but be very intentional about what work they do and what hazards they're around. And in the end, you might be in a big situation of disaster and you might have to call FEMA in. This was a couple weeks after those 3 major flooding events, and there was a lot of damage to the park. So it was enough that the governor and all of our local legislative folks came down and looked through the park, looked at the damage, kind of assessing things on whether or not it was going to be considered a disaster relief situation. So right off the bat, when you are starting any of your efforts, make sure that everybody is tracking their time. Even if you can try and track how long your volunteers were there, make sure you're writing that stuff down. Keep all of your invoices and keep them for, 6 months after any kind of event in your parks that costs you any kind of money, because you never know if you're just a small part in the rest of your county. If you had a lot of damage all over the county, your whole county as a whole might be applying for FEMA. And so they're going to want that information, but it may be a few months later. So in any of these major events where you're putting money into fixing roads, fixing infrastructure and things like that, save those invoices, get that volunteer and staff time recorded. And that includes the resources that you used for that. If you used your backhoe for 10 hours and you used your skid loaders for 20 hours, all of that equipment, time, and wear and tear will count towards those FEMA type reimbursements as well. So again, for any of you that keep track of anything, keep track of everything until you're for sure that you're not going to be in a reimbursement situation. And at any point, if you really feel like you want your representatives to know what happened in your park, if you're really working towards that new road that into your park because it floods all the time, even if it wasn't major damage all throughout your area, but this is something you have in your master plan that's a safety issue, bring your representatives out there when it does happen so they can see what's happening, and maybe they can fund that project a little sooner than you hoped, and get that master plan project done, because they can say, well, yeah, you say you need a new road. Show them why you need a new road when the event happens. So get your legislators involved in your emergency response situations. So that is a really kind of big stuff here that you want to make sure that you're thinking about. So this is the point where we all have our emergency response situations that happen in our parks and trails. I covered the surface of it and a lot of the different types of emergencies that we can run into, but feel free to speak up. Let us know kind of some of the things that you did for an emergent, like maybe there's a one-off, and you want to share how you handled it, or some of the things that maybe you didn't think of at the time, that you can share with other people so they might be able to plan and prepare for it. So questions, comments, stories. I want to put some time back to you for the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, this is Sarah Weed with Stearns County Parks Department. We haven't, well, we've had instances, and one of our most popular park is Quarry Park, in Waite Park. And unfortunately, we have had some drownings in the past 10 years.
Mhm.
And in previous years, we really do have two main arteries to our two swimming quarries. And this year, knock on wood, we haven't had any instances, but we have implemented um, this year that if there is a drowning incident, we are shutting down the entire park and getting everybody out. Like you said, you do have those gawkers and those watchers. And when all of our emergency response resources are at one quarry, um, we don't want to leave that other quarry um, in more risk. So this year we've implemented that. We haven't had any issues, but it's like we're preparing for the worst, hoping that it won't happen. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's the way you can try and manage it a little better is, yeah,
Mhm.
you work off your experiences and you go out. Debriefing after things is a great way to plan better for the future. Always after an incident, come back and say, man, what went well and what do we really need to improve on next time? So
Yeah, and
always,
all like with that, it's with the debrief is like we really like last year I really made it a point to talk to all of the seasonals that were associated with the incident and
mhm.
just making sure that they knew all of their resources that if they did need to move forward from this, where could they go as well? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's two really good points is, yeah, when do you close your park down for safety for everyone? And yeah, what happens afterwards? Not everybody's used to being around when somebody passes away due to an emergency or sees the gory side of some of our emergencies and doesn't sit well with a lot of people. And it might be their first time ever experiencing that. Um, and that's a lot. That's a lot for anybody. So yeah, checking in with your people after it happened and yeah, making sure that you're talking about it and that they know their resources is a really big deal. Something that we have those resources in EMS and fire, but for the layperson, it, those resources are a little fewer and far between. So work with your organization on where they can go. Thanks, Sarah.
Mhm.
I did put a few documents in the chat. I put a template for a COOP, continuity of operations plan, so you can try to follow that or use it. I also put our Oxbow Park emergency planning for all types of situations. You can copy paste and use that template as much as you want. And then our personal parks coop and plan for different types of emergencies from the countywide perspective. So feel free to use any of those as a template for your organization or however you want to use that information. I also suggest, kind of forgot to mention it when we were looking at the map of Oxbow and the helipad sites and things like that. It's really important, I think, to work with your GIS department or even just, pull up a map of your park and make a grid system and print it out. Print it out with those little boxes of a grid on there. So when it comes to search and rescue, you have a much easier way of telling people where they should be. And coordinating smaller search areas. So make a grid map, make a utilities map, use a lot of maps of your parks to help relay the information you need to people. Anybody else with a question or a story?
This is Mitch here. You said, the biggest thing is getting volunteers to help. Kind of takes a lot of weight off your shoulders and,
Mhm.
and cost. Do you have a general insurance form or liability form you provide to all your volunteers then when you have that happen?
We did not in the past, but yeah, our HR department now, our risk management does have those volunteer forms for that. So like if you get the school groups out to help you, or volunteer organizations of some sort, have that kind of waiver form handy and ready to go for them. Yeah.
I think another thing that we've been doing for Stearns County is just informing people about the different species of ticks out there, having poison ivy identification cards available, which I was surprised on how difficult that was to find. But then also created like a half sheet tick report that allows people just to tape the tick to the paper. And I can send that to you, Harlan, if people are interested, but it's pretty straightforward, and our insurance or our emergency management helped us with that as well.
Yep, not everything is like that right now, immediate emergency, but can turn into emergencies later on for sure. Okay, well, I will give you all 4 minutes back to your day, but thank you for sitting in. I hope some of this information kind of helps you with some of your organization's response to some of the emergencies that might happen, but really it comes down to just planning, plan, talk about it, and determine what resources you might need in any kind of situation, and get those phone trees in place. So yeah, if you need any help with some of that planning, if you want more information, you can certainly reach out to GMPT or reach out to myself, and I can certainly try to help you as much as I can, or whatever information I might have. So I'm going to put my email in the chat as well. All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks,
you.
Carlin.